I like Noah and his buttons here. Hi everyone, my name is Mina and I'm going to be talking to you for a little bit. I'm glad that actually I'm going first because this is going to be very hard to follow. I'm going to try to keep it short and kind of curated a series of kind of pictures and videos from past projects that I think is a little bit relevant to the themes that you might kind of encounter today here in this space, but you might not as well. So feel free to kind of ask questions towards the end, since I'm going to be kind of running very quickly through it. This is me. Depending when you see me, in what time, what context, my kind of looks changes a lot. But I do keep my educator identity pretty often as the through line for these types of talks. I am an assistant professor of design at Rowan University, and I do a bunch of different kind of things in there besides teaching. So you might see a few of those things here as part of this presentation. So my practice is pretty project-based. So you might see a variety of things that are going to be might seemingly kind of seem like not connected, but for me they are, because it's a project that is inviting me and my engagement with that question. Language is also a through line through my projects, and it has different functionalities. Sometimes it's a medium, sometimes it's a tool, sometimes it's a framework, sometimes it's an amalgamation of different things. The other kind of capacity that kind of, again, is almost evident in all of my work is this idea of interactivity that changes to a form of relatability. And, these are kind of like, again, generic, general words, and I think kind of seeing them in context makes more sense, but I wanted to kind of give you three things to kind of maybe as toeholds to follow as I go through these images. Besides those three things, I also have three other ingredients that I mix in. Play, chaos, and working with the constraints of any system that I'm stepping into. And by system, I mean it could be a question, it could be a project, it could be a paper, it could be any form of engagement and curiosity in a sense. Those ingredients then weave themselves into variables of some sort that I build off because of that presence of language. It's very important for me to find these linguistic pathways into understanding what I'm dealing with. So sometimes they come as pairs, sometimes they're more in two words. So depending on the dimensions of the question. So this could be like a threefold, sixfold, ninefold kind of process that by assigning words to them, it helps me kind of navigate it. Sometimes I let it become very big and then I narrow it down, but sometimes it's like a more of, again, like an organic change, which kind of leads me to talking about this. Not knowing is huge as part of my process. I don't enter any project with knowing not exactly what I'm going to be doing, and I engage in an activity of some sort which translates to a deep listening. In the words of one of my mentors, what that means is that I'm not leading anything, I'm just following cues. I might enter a space, I listen to how it kind of its acoustics responds to me. I might kind of be drawn to how my body is kind of responding as it's going through a space as well too. Or it could be something about kind of interactions or lack of them, right? In a space that allows me to kind of get cues and say, oh, that I can engage, that I can kind of play with, right? That's interesting. So I'm going to be kind of using these tiny frameworks of language to showcase a few of my projects from a couple years ago to like kind of recent. And I thought kind of just starting with glitch might be a little bit helpful for myself, because that's something that, as a person who is engaged in theory and as a scholar who writes about these kind of things, I do consider myself a glitch feminist. Has many kind of different connotations. What that means that I try to go against the system. I see a glitch as an opportunity. It's like more of a disruption into status quo, for example. And that kind of means that I might be kind of engaging with different kind of, again, frameworks. It could be like the unwanted, the discarded, the unintended kind of consequences of a question. So just kind of like moving a little bit faster through this. This is like one of the very, very kind of early examples of the things I started doing in Philadelphia as I moved here in 2016. This was a makeshift bookshelf of some sort, but it was kind of, again, playing with this idea of what is truth, what is not truth, embracing this idea of, again, unintended or discarded in a sense. So there is, I hope this plays, there we go. A sound sensor is pretty low. I don't know if I can hear it. Hold on, one more time. Oh. So there's a sensor that's embedded inside. As you walk in front of it, it's a Christian marketplace saying that I'm interested in the sounds that people do not want. So again, like, it's something unexpected that people didn't expect in the gallery setting. They were just like, oh, are these books? They're not books. Oh, there, what is it? So going through that, I wanted to expand a little bit, kind of connected to a collaborative project that I did also around 2018, I think it was this one too, with kind of kinetic and sculptural apparatus, in a sense that I was trying to question this idea of language, or maybe kind of disintegration of language, or like miscommunication, or when the miscommunication starts kind of falling apart, or you want to communicate something but it just like doesn't go through. So this is a very giant sculpture of a tongue that, if you tweeted to it reflux, it would start twitching. So it would actually kind of have an interaction of some sort, depending on how much of that tweet you send it to it, and it would glitch, it would kind of act weirdly in this space. And that was kind of one part of that exhibition. There were like other kind of bodily parts, mouth, a back, a torso, a leg, that they were doing different kind of functionalities. And this was another kind of, I don't know what's happening. There we go. Is an AR experiment of some sort, because around 2018, AR was like pretty much still a little newish, in a sense that it was really hard to kind of assemble too many auditory assets into it. So it was like, you know, trying to kind of push the limit a little bit, but also kind of thinking in terms of, you know, this idea of ensemble, going from like one kind of like small gesture of sound. What if you go like amplify that and make it a little bit more kind of systematic function? So which kind of led me to this other project that I did as part of a very quick sound residency at Icebox Project Space. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that space. It's a very unique, giant, you'll see a picture of it in a second. But from, again, like that element of kind of sound, which was kind of becoming a dominant force in the projects that I was doing, I wanted to break apart from that kind of like one-on-one. So like, I don't know if you know coding, software development, like breaking in terms of like, you know, what is the input, output, or kind of like the scenario of user experience, in a sense that it's not just responding to one scenario, you start amplifying this. Which kind of, again, it started kind of mapping itself more of a chaotic network. I call this a little bit kind of an offshoot of a rhizome. You cannot understand its beginning and end. You can enter and exit to some extent at any point. And that's just something that I wanted to kind of dive in. So we're going to look at lecture mode for a second. Sorry about this, but I wanted to show this image because I think when you enter a space like this, a giant space that tends to be almost like empty from any kind of visual or like sonic cues, we tend to think about it as like an empty space, a container, right? So like that's the basic model of space or reality for us, that we think we see something, thinking happens in our head, and we do something outside, right? So again, I did a ton of work on this perception and things like that in grad school, and the whole idea was like, how do you break apart this false mentality of reductionism, perhaps, right? And how do you bring interaction and an active kind of engagement as part of that reality building? So this is a space that I was given. That's a terrible picture. It shows terrible there. It's nicer here. It was a giant fish cooler out of concrete, very specific acoustics. It would crush the body as you entered it. You just like felt like you're nothing technically in the space. And I had 1 week to figure out what I wanted to do with this space, and I knew I was going to do something with the sound because there was a lot of potential with that. And again, some of these pictures you can't see because they're too dark for this projector, but I'm gonna like go through this for a second. And it kind of something with that kind of emptiness, the blackness, the kind of the space itself made me think in terms of how do I want to bring this, like if you take the vision away, or like if you kind of wanted to break apart that container mentality, what if I just like started kind of loosening the boundaries? You couldn't see the edges of this space anymore, right? So that darkness became the entry point, and I had these, I think it was like 11 sensors that they were coming from the ceiling, and as you would walk underneath them, they would trigger a sound, and the sound would trigger the kind of visual elements. I think this froze for a second. Let's see if I'm gonna go past it. There we go. So as you can see, kind of the louder the resonances were in the space, the space would start defining itself a little bit more. But the kind of the cool part for me for this was that every bit of sound I was getting triggered by these sensors. They were part of a song, a Persian song that was kind of like a form of resistance. So you had to work with people around you to be able to activate enough of those bits to be able to make music, for example. So like this kind of turned the space to some sort of a social machine. People started, I didn't give any instructions, people started figuring out amongst themselves that, oh, I need to work with you, I need to work with you to be able to kind of like collectively to make sound here in this space. One other experiment that also kind of looks, I don't know, maybe it's this vision that I have in here, it looks very skewed. One other experiment that I did during the opening, I had a few musician friends act as analog sensors. And funny thing, not only people that figured out that they are also kind of interactive in a sense, they were kids. So like if they would come close to them, they would start playing, or they would just like move around the space. It's just like very cool. I really like kind of mentioning that as part of this project. And that project was very important for me to think in terms of how do I want to like think in terms of that relatability that seems to be important for me as a person, right? And bring that back into my art. So kind of expanding off of that, going a little bit into like how do I engage with public space a little bit more. I did this project as in the former UArts gallery. It was also a collaboration by a friend. We make these kind of robotic kind of contraptions and kinetic objects that they would act out. There were a bunch of kind of series of like numbers and letters, and nonsensical. It was like a kind of comment on absurdity and kind of lack of, again, like communication in that public space, but trying to kind of engage a passerby. There are like, again, many layers of information here. There was a sound piece, which might actually kind of, we have a video I think in here that I'm going to play in a second. But also kind of embedding this ideas of bringing people in. How do we make people stop in the street, right? So I think kind of, again, AR being a little bit kind of new to me, perhaps like around 2018 was like huge in terms of using it as a tool, as an invitation of some sort, as a moment of pause and kind of shifting kind of perception perhaps. So moving forward,
Bella Vista, Point Breeze, West Snyder, Northeast 3 or 4, occasional complexity, or becoming modern.
25 they, 23 they, 25 1, 8, 50.
And I do that a lot. I'm moving so that I can kind of talk over, not over the sound. Again, these broken letters and numbers and things, it's a commentary coming back to language a little more literally perhaps. But that kind of sound that you heard, it was inspired by the shipping forecast in UK that they used to kind of, again, like it's this gibberish language if you're not from that area, but it's like about very important information to be kind of communicated. So I actually kind of made a version of that for Philadelphia using kind of neighborhood associations and social conditions to be able to kind of bring that layer of commentary back. But again, like it sounds gibberish, nobody understands that. But again, like all in all, as a package, it was a commentary on absurdity and kind of lack of communication, perhaps. That led me to the kind of next project that I wanted to talk to you is because they're all evolving around kind of communication and miscommunication. I was invited to do a residency at the Science Center here in Philadelphia too, and I entered that project with brainstorming with the CEO that, oh, you're gonna come in, there's gonna be data, and you're gonna be like sonifying it, we're gonna make music. It's like, great, that's not what we're gonna do, but okay. I came in, and I was very interested in what they were not considering as part of their process. So again, like having this linguistic curiosity or obsession, or whatever that you want to call it, I was pretty amazed how they were using very specific lingo amongst themselves to kind of refer to things. but also kind of they would look at a string of gibberish codons and I don't know, amino acids, and they were like juicy, fatty, this and this and that. I was like, what? How? And that kind of again fascinated me in terms of understanding how I can use it as material, perhaps. But also kind of like using this as an opportunity to bring that kind of counter narratives that are missing in science, right? And this is not something new. I don't want to necessarily kind of start interrogating science too much in front of this camera, but I do. There are a lot of kind of conflicting information. I mean, we kind of see science as rigid and factual, but I did a quick experiment with 5 scientists, asking them to answer a survey, and all their answers were contradictory, not in the sense that they're false, but their backgrounds were different. So a molecular scientist would have a different understanding of assigning traits to microbiomes than a chemical one. So it was like, that's just stupid, and the other one would say that's intelligent, because they're looking at a different context about their relationships. So that whole thing kind of led me in terms of understanding this, if I'm shadowing scientists, and that was kind of, again, another obsession about the lingo, that I was just quietly going around for a few months in the lab, asking questions. I had no biology background, and just being curious about things that are happening. And that element of shadow became another kind of linguistic kind of aspect in terms of me digging further into maybe interrogating science to some extent. I'm warming up to commenting on science. But then pandemic hit. So I was supposed to have an exhibition from the outcomes of this thing, and that whole thing was canceled. The work is still continued. I continued Zooming with the scientists, and that led me to kind of take those frameworks I was taking from science, whether it's there's 20 amino acids, and I could be pretty OCD. If there's numbers, if there's letters, I take them and I use them, and I love those. So it turned to this interactive website, and this is actually its navigation. This is a sitemap of strings of interaction about 20 hypotheses that are questioning the element of science and its approach and its process. But they're like riddles, they're like games in a sense. So these are some screenshots. They're some video essays, there's literally kind of interactive games, there's a MATLib, there's a bunch of other things out here that you can kind of play. I really encourage you to go to the website. Pictures don't capture it, but I could spend a whole talk just unraveling this project. So I'm going to keep moving forward, but every one of these was a little bit of that anomalies I was picking up in science's process and bringing it forward. And actually kind of, again, I was very lucky, despite pandemic, this got attention of a few folks at NYU. They published it as an interactive essay in one of their journals adjacent. But I like that they were able to kind of put in not just a text, which is kind of, again, as an academic, as a scholar, sometimes you get very siloed into just wanting to articulate things that aren't necessarily your forte. There's a reason I'm an artist, right? I do write, but I like kind of letting work to kind of also work, talk for itself if we can. So then pandemic kind of started loosening up. They were like, oh, exhibition is back up. So they're like, now translate everything to exhibition. So there was another 20 experiments of some sort. They're some sort of kind of began commentary on failure and, or maybe kind of it's just a little bit of kind of ambiguity of science communication and those kind of glitches that I was seeing. So I kind of made a failed Rube Goldberg machine. There was this whole protein that I technically wanted to synthesize, but I only went to the extent of making an algorithm that was translating kind of language and biodata back and forth. So that picture that you're seeing as part of Rube Goldberg is the actual kind of protein that is supposed to be ethical protein. So can we synthesize ethics? So I started asking very big questions as part of that residency.
You can kill it, cook it, and eat it, and it's always going to come back. I will be different. A little different every time.
There was no transition there. So what you just saw was a manifesto of some sort that acted as a constitution of truth that I wrote with the help of that algorithm and translated to biodata, and then kind of make that kind of 3D model of the protein itself. But that was the backbone of everything. There were two voices, one being a psychopath, one being a gentle, angelic kind of voice. They're counteracting each other a little bit in that conversation. And again, like, there was a lot of kind of big questions I was asking here, like, who writes these types of things? Is there God? Is there a guy like sitting here and just like typing out like genomic things? Like, again, like, depending on your beliefs, you get into these kind of existential questions of sort, like how, like, I think the ethics and morality of the whole project made me kind of pause a little bit after 2 years of engaging with it to some extent. So I was happy to just kind of engage with it with more kind of playful manners and kind of maybe kind of bringing a little bit of the poetics of that questioning forward. So again, sound had a lot of kind of presence in here, and synthesization. Can we kind of get intelligence from different kind of matters? I'm not going to dwell too much about it, but something interesting about this project as it turned to an exhibition was this shadow room. And again, an idea of like you recycle kind of an idea of translation when you're like me, who likes to work with words and systems, and this whole room was adjacent to the exhibition, but it functioned as a shadow of the exhibition. So it was like almost like the brain of the exhibition was processing it in the back room. So a bunch of kind of like, weird things was happening in here. Another kind of, target in terms of kind of using language, the idea of predation was like huge as part of the process too. But then I kind of using kind of lab lingo, lab material to be able to make that commentary was like, again, a playground for me. I was just like playing around, retranslating the content that I use in the website, since that was kind of was supposed to be an exhibition, into its format, so like more translation on its own. How am I doing on time? Excellent. So I'm going to pivot very quickly towards the things that I'm doing since then, a little bit more kind of recently. And I think kind of like the pandemic changed us all to some extent. And I started a new chapter of my academic life around 3 years ago, which made me want to be outside more than inside. I did not want to work necessarily for white cube galleries, and I wanted to kind of think, if I have been working with immersion, interactivity, all this kind of like words, how does that translate for me if I were to kind of change my context, change my approach a little bit in that sense? So like, tuning outwards was like a shift, a kind of maybe a paradigm shift for myself. And it also kind of made me pause and think, rethink that relationship. Again, I have dissected this idea of space a lot. I just showed you one tiny picture of that kind of basic container model, which I have interrogated massively, but thinking in terms of what other ways can I approach the idea of environment or environments as a large kind of context. And again, playing with words, I think kind of really questing out the idea of and thinking in terms of how can we be of an environment, with an environment, for an environment, et cetera, right? So using that kind of language mechanism to be able to make something that I don't do necessarily as part of my practice. So I was commissioned to do a project for our university centennial, and I was told they wanted some sort of projection, they wanted light, and they wanted it to be large, and they wanted to, it's very kind of like, weird parameters. I was like, sure, we can do that, but the idea came down to like, again, not knowing how to approach things. They're like, yeah, what if we just like kind of bounce the logo, in the planetarium? I was like, no, we're not doing that. So it became, I designed a whole class for this project. For a whole semester, I worked with students in terms of tuning into our campus, thinking about campus being our lab, but also as a living organism. What is it trying to tell us? Kind of going back to the idea of deep listening, right? And it kind of gave rise to a lot of different projects, but kind of to fulfill kind of the obligations of doing like a projection mapping project. This is actually one of them that I'm going to be showing that actually used TouchDesigner. We opened up a time portal. So this was, again, like there was a lot of digging, excavating for this project. We went to archives, there was a lot of sound components, there was a lot of images, and we kind of came down to these like series of portraits that they were self-submitted to the university with kind of like, personal narratives. And we took 100 of those and we wove them together in TouchDesigner to make this kind of, again, constellations of some sort, but kind of bringing the interactive element a little bit back into the project, where you can kind of allow the audience to have agency and create these new narratives, perhaps, right? And, you know, again, 100 years of history is too much material to work with. And I was like, my first time probably kind of working with archives. So taking kind of that rear mirror view kind of into the process and thinking kind of like, it's less about what was in the past, it's more about how we look into the future, right? So allowing people kind of to bring their voices a little bit as part of that project was huge. And so again, like, you know, there was like a nighttime event, a time portal of some sort was opened up, and simultaneously inside the planetarium, we had this prompt of some sort that you can kind of interact with it as well, that was asking, I can't read anymore, I can't refresh my memory. Imagine a future 100 years from now, say, what do you think? And then people kind of interject different kind of answers in there, but also kind of like having those portraits as kind of a moment of pause and respite, also allowing people kind of to interact with them was like another kind of thing. So I have done a lot of linguistic interrogation as part of this project too, which I've only put one of the icons that, again, like bringing symbols and diagrams is also huge for me as part of that translation into this slide, but there's like a whole website on this. So if you're curious into it, I really encourage you to kind of jump into the way I kind of start elaborating linguistic frameworks so that it becomes more like an adaptive model. You can take it and maybe kind of incorporate it in your own project in a sense. So this was actually a word from immersion that kind of led me to think more in terms of submersion as moving forward. So as I said, I am an educator. I cannot remove that part of myself in anything that I do, and mixing education with research is part of everything that I do. So like I do more in collaboration with my students that I can kind of even kind of contextualize as part of my practice, but community partners, students, faculty, everybody is like a little bit of a bit of a collaboration, for me. So, but I do enter with that idea of like, you know, again, critical play. We're there to have fun, but also we're there to learn and then engage with intentionality with the world. So that kind of leads me to kind of wrapping up a little bit is how, this is like where I am now. I think, moved on a little bit from the world of immersion. It's still part of the kind of language that I engage with, but I'm much more interested in forms of immersion that kind of bring submersion. And then I think that's like a little bit of my own, maybe personal trauma of some sort, and water and the fear of suffocation. I don't know, maybe I'm trying to kind of translate that for myself. But that has led me to work with planetarium. So one of my main collaborators right now is our planetarium on site, which allows me and my students to throughout semesters, every fall semester, and then sometimes in spring semesters, we make animated sonifications of different things, different kind of prompts, and we showcase them in the animation, in the planetarium itself. And I think planetariums themselves are huge in terms of that, bringing that sense of submersion, because the way they are physically designed, that you sit and you look up, and you feel like you're underneath the ocean of some sort, right? So like, you can take it as a sky, you can take it as an ocean, you can take it as a tunnel of water, it could be an aquarium. There's a lot of that kind of tendencies of being a little bit underneath. And I'm working a lot in terms of kind of bringing AR and kind of VR components a little bit as another element into it. But this past 2 years, I've been working on what's supposed to be a quick animation. It's not as quick. And this is like a kind of sketch version of it. It's 2.5 minutes of some sort. It's about space junk. And we're redesigning kind of its format to function for the planetarium. So again, like taking those cues from the space to let this kind of form and content have a different type of dialogue is the intent in here. So again, there's a whole narrative on climate anxiety. That's another kind of one of my, I guess, traumas. I had this dream that a carrot could have ended the whole world, and I needed to somehow let that become part of my practice and bring that kind of storytelling aspect to tap into something larger, because again, my research right now is a lot more about ecology and social kind of aspect of behavior ecology in a sense. So letting kind of artistic research carry that weight of articulating something larger is kind of the take-in here. I'm going to move forward. You're not going to see the end. And I'm going to end a little bit of introducing an institution that I run. It's called IMMaD, but IMMaD is Institution for Innovation, Material, Media, and Design. And there's a lot of work that's gone into like kind of translating its philosophy, what it does. We have a whole manifesto, but it's how we contextualize research in an artistic capacity. That's like unconventional. It doesn't kind of fit in the norms, perhaps. And we invite everyone to kind of be part of that dialogue. So if you're interested, this is our website. The whole premise of the institution narrows down itself to meet, to wonder. So if you wanted to meet and wonder, come find me here. Thank you. I don't know if there's room or time for a Q&A, but I'm more than happy to silently pause for 7 seconds. That's all I can bear to see if there's any questions. Seven? Oh my God, you caught me. No, you're right on time. Yes, so they're asking if there's anything new that I'm working on that I'm excited about. Yes, I am taking a little bit of a pause from larger scale projects and working on actually letting the poetics of language kind of show a little bit itself in series of things that I can do in my studio in my downtime when I'm not teaching or writing essays. So that is very exciting. It's actually kind of very meditative, but it has that kind of geographical, ecological kind of also undertone to it as well. Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking that question. And that's a wrap. Thank you.